Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. A number of stories have come to light recently that illustrate what our government has been doing to us. Remember that God created the institution of government to help suppress evil and provide justice for the innocent. But as so often happens, we take the good things of God and turn them into evil and selfish things. From a series of articles from the Daily Wire comes this very first story, because I think there's a number of stories here recently that kind of illustrate what I'm talking about here. And this first story is that a conservative watchdog accused federal bureaucrats of hiding key data from a government-funded study that would expose the questionable science, and I put science in air quotes, behind putting gender-confused kids on puberty blockers. The American Accountability Foundation filed a suit on Wednesday alleging that the Department of Health and Human Services and the National Institute of Health are withholding the release of data expected to significantly undermine transgender ideology. The data is from a government-funded, this is a government-funded study that the author admitted in an interview with the New York Times would hurt the case for placing young children on puberty blockers. We've talked about this just a little bit before. Now they're filing suit. Quote, for over a year, HHS has been hiding a bombshell study that confirms what we've known all along. Transgender therapy is a failure. American Accountability Foundation President Tom Jones told the Daily Wire that, quote, the lead researcher herself admitted the findings challenged the effectiveness of these drugs. HHS bureaucrats are playing woke political games, ignoring science and common sense, unquote. The American Accountability Foundation first requested the data from the $9.7 million project after the Times published a story on October 23rd of last year. That featured researcher Joanna Olson Kennedy admitting that she had delayed publishing the effects of puberty blockers on children due to political concerns. Olson Kennedy told the Times that the data did not show better mental outcomes for children placed on puberty blockers. They did not, I repeat. 5 days later, the American Accountability Foundation submitted a Freedom of Information Act request to get that data. However, the response came with significant redactions that obscured important data points. The suit filed in the District of Columbia, and it said, quote, though the NIH sent a response and produced some records in November of 2024, the NIH's production appeared incomplete, as it did not include Dr. Olson Kennedy's data and contained redactions throughout. NIH's response also appeared incomplete and insufficient because it didn't justify any of the redactions, nor did it explain how the search was conducted to find responsive records pertaining to the data set. This is what the suit said. Jones filed an appeal of the redactions on January 6th of this year, but says that the issue has not yet been resolved. The suit says that HHS and the NIH have violated federal records laws in their handling of the request. So again, they're hiding stuff here. Scientific records that have been redacted include the names of researchers who aided the project, their background, the information on the compensation that they received from the government. Also redacted are demographic information and other data points about the kids who were put on the puberty blockers. The data is redacted for proprietary information, as they like to put it, while some is left out with the reason redacted by agreement. The lawsuit said that the AAF opposed the vague redactions and objected to the adequacy of NIH's research. Specifically, AAF requested a copy of the data to which Dr. Olson referred. The FOIA request, the coordinator's response, said nothing about how the research was conducted, whether such data are being held, and if they are being withheld, why they are being withheld. So what's the reason for all of this? They won't say. A preprint version of Olson Kennedy's study appears to be available, but it has not yet been peer reviewed, and Olson Kennedy and her co-authors claim in that version that their research shows that youth demonstrated both stability and improvements in emotional and mental health over 24 months. Well, the AAF, the American Accountability Foundation, believes that all the data documenting the study should be made available so it can, of course, be independently analyzed, right? That would be transparency. Heaven forbid. Quote, "We're fighting back, suing the HHS to force them to follow the law and release this truth," Jones said. The American people deserve to know what's being hidden by the radical left. So again, we've covered this study that they've been trying to hide before. Now we're starting to see details come out, and roughly because of the FOIA requests, and also because of the lawsuit. But it's not the only thing that illustrates what I'm talking about. Another example here is that numerous organizations have latched onto the homelessness crisis in the United States to advocate for Marxist, anti-capitalist, or anti-American ideologies, according to a report published last week by conservative watchdog Capital Research Center, or CRC. In the 113-page dossier, CRC identifies multiple groups that are part of extremist ideological movements advocating for certain policies to address homelessness. The report refers to this network of leftist groups as the homelessness industrial complex, which helps shape policies that are counterproductive and fail to address the root problems of the homelessness crisis. I've talked about this before. There is a homelessness industrial complex. There is groups of people that they don't want to see the problem go away. The majority of them are government officials, or they're nonprofits that get their money from the government in government grants. Oftentimes, their incentive is to make the problem worse. They want to see more homeless, so they get more money. And that's what we're seeing here. Many of the groups, this is a quote, many of the groups over time have moved away from a focus on directly serving people who suffer to advocacy, which is to say political fighting. This is what CRC President Scott Walter told the Daily Wire. And he added, some groups have gotten seriously radical. The report, which CRC put together in cooperation with the Discovery Institute, which is a conservative think tank, combos through numerous organizations and highlights how they have pushed some of the most extreme leftist talking points. The report also analyzes the financial data of leftist networks and identifies how they have spent billions of dollars in their supported effort to address homelessness, while the crisis has only spiraled further out of control. Researchers with CRC looked into dozens of nonprofits that signed onto a Supreme Court America's brief in last year's Grants Pass versus Johnson case, which opposing arrests and fines for homelessness individuals who violated city ordinances. So Grants Pass, Oregon, they passed these ordinances basically saying that you can't camp in public spaces, right? Well, there was a case brought saying no, the homeless can do that. Well, that went all the way to the Supreme Court. In that list of organizations and researchers from that case found many groups that didn't focus solely on addressing homelessness, but also push radical leftism on other issues. The National Harm Reduction Coalition, for example, supported funding the police defunding the police, and told drug abusers that, quote, no one knows what's best for you better than you. They told drug abusers that. Whatever drugs you use, we want you to be safe and healthy. Does that sound like an organization that's trying to get people off of drugs? In 2022, the National Harm Reduction Coalition received 73% of its $12.8 million funding from government grants, your taxpayer dollars. San Francisco Rising, another leftist organization that signed onto the Grants Pass versus Johnson America's brief, is open about its political activism, calling itself an electoral alliance working to build political power with working class communities of color, unquote. The Center for Constitutional Rights filed another brief for the Grants Pass versus Johnson case, urging the court to oppose the city's efforts to enforce the law against homeless individuals. The Center for Constitutional Rights defended Hamas October 7th of 2023 terrorist attack on Israel, arguing that the Palestinian resistance fighters, as they put that, as they call them, had the right to carry out the attacks on military targets. That's crazy. The Western Regional Advocacy Project, it's another nonprofit highlighted by CRC, espouses anti-capitalist rhetoric and has made calls to ambush police. That's what they want. They've called for people to ambush police. The group's executive director, Paul Bowden, wrote an article in early 2025 arguing that the Trump administration is instituting neoliberal fascism in America. Quote, the essence of extreme radicalism is fury that America is a horrible place, and for those people, they want to exploit the homeless because they can point to the homeless as supposed evidence that this country is horrible. This is what Walter said. Quote, if that is what you're doing, you don't want there to be fewer homeless people. You want their suffering as vivid and as widespread as possible. And if they were in an institution that was helping them with their mental or their substance abuse, instead of being out on the streets, that's not very good for your PR campaign now, is it? Other far-left groups that are involved in housing and homelessness advocacy have openly pushed Marxism. The Autonomous Tenants Union Network, love some of these names, don't you, says that it fights, quote, for a world without landlords and without rent, and then adds that it wants to end capitalism itself. Sounds like a New York mayor candidate, doesn't it? Stomp Out Slumlords, a DC-based member of Autonomous Descendants Union Network, wrote in 2023, quote, we're not going to get to communism without moving people to talk to their neighbors first, and more importantly, doing it ourselves. Here in DC, exercising tenant purchase rights or pushing for rent freezes aren't going to immediately decommodify housing. True. But these are the small-scale sites of disruption from which we can build working class power into something bigger. Okay, I mean, just flat out communism. That's what it is. Okay, they've put it in their own words. The Manhattan Institute's Christopher Rufo, who has written exclusively and extensively, not exclusively, but extensively about America's homelessness issue, said in the forward to the CCR's report, the rhetoric of housing is a human right and abolish homelessness is seductive, but it functions as a smokescreen. Behind it lies a set of interests dedicated to dismantling enforcement, expanding bureaucracies, and keeping streams of funding flowing into activism rather than into effective service delivery to those despite need. That's what Rufo said. Now, the Trump administration has sought to address the homelessness crisis by focusing on law enforcement and rehabilitation. President Donald Trump also signed an executive order in July that aims to move homeless individuals into long-term institutional settings for humane treatment through the appropriate use of civil commitment to restore public order and to redirect federal funds toward effective methods of addressing homelessness. So, I mean, a couple of really good steps there, right? Quote, surrendering our cities and citizens to disorder and fear is neither compassionate to the homeless nor other citizens, is what the order stated. It also said, my administration will take a new approach focused on protecting public safety. The Trump administration has faced backlash from leftist groups over its move to clean up homeless encampments. Of course it has, right? And guess who? The Southern Poverty Law Center is another group that has inserted itself in the homelessness debate while advocating for leftist ideologies. The SPLC has frequently been slammed for smearing conservatives. CRC found that the SPLC often engages in homelessness policy by committing America's filings that oppose enforcement. So they don't want any of these laws against homelessness enforced. After Trump signed the July executive order, the Southern Poverty Law Center argued that the order promotes unlawful and out-of-date approaches that are rooted in anti-black racism and bias against people with disabilities. Yeah, just a bunch of gobbledygook. Walter said that rooting out the homelessness industrial complex in the United States remains a huge challenge that will take years. It really is a homelessness industrial complex. They make millions and billions, in some cases, of money off taxpayer dollars. It will take years. This is a quote here. It will take years because there's so much money and inertia behind the current bad industrial complex on this, is what Walter's saying. And he added, so much of this is state and local, not federal. The federal money is often funding bad state and local things. So it's not like the feds have no role or no leverage, but if Portland and Seattle and San Francisco and Los Angeles want to continue to be foolish and hurtful, it will not be easy to change because they are the tip of the spear for dealing with this. There's just so much money going there. And as soon as you try to even slow down that spigot, man, they are all over that, right? Because they don't want to see their money go away. But that's not the only example. Another example, a bombshell report released by the Department of Homeland Security revealed that FEMA targeting of Trump supporters was not an isolated incident, contradicting testimony by former President Joe Biden's FEMA chief. The DHS Privacy Office said that an investigation into FEMA found that the agency has been tracking the political beliefs and conservative disaster survivors since at least September of 2021. The probe was launched by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem in response to a Daily Wire report, which we reported on, exposing the FEMA employee for instructing her team to avoid homes advertising Trumps, like they had a Trump sign in their front yard after the aftermath of Hurricane Milton. So she told them, hey, if they have a Trump sign out front, then you need to avoid that home and avoid helping them. Those instructions given by a FEMA employee named Marnie Washington, who was fired after the Daily Wire report came in. She wasn't fired before, But after the report came out, then all of a sudden, oh yeah, well, hey, we're firing her. They told relief workers canvassing Lake Placid, Florida, to skip the homes of people with Trump signs or even a flag, Trump flag in their yard. In response to this report, Deanne Criswell, who led FEMA under Biden, claimed that the incident was isolated and did not reflect the agency's standard practices. This is what she said. However, this political weaponization was not isolated. The DHS report found that, and it's saying that it had uncovered evidence that this also occurred during other disasters across the nation. Since Hurricane Ida in September of 2021, FEMA employees have made notes about the political beliefs of disaster survivors, like angry political rant, as they would put it. Sign states, I'm bitter gun owner, clinging to my religion. They have other things they wrote down. Homeowner had a sign stating, this is Trump country, and pro-gun sign. So these are the notes they're taking down so they know which houses to avoid helping. Other notes left in the FEMA system include statements like, there was a political flyer, so I didn't leave FEMA brochure. And another one, a lot of explicit political flags, posters, etc. F. Joe Biden. MAGA 2024. Joe Biden sucks. Trump 2024. We do not recommend anyone visiting this location, they put down. The federal government, here's another quote, the federal government was withholding aid against Americans in crisis based on their political beliefs. This should horrify every American, regardless of political persuasion. This is what DHS Secretary Kristi Noem said. She said, for years, FEMA employees under the Biden administration intentionally delayed much-needed aid to Americans suffering from natural disasters on purely political grounds. DHS said that Noem had referred the incident in Lake Placid to the Department of Justice for further investigation and political prosecution. The DHS report found that FEMA violated the Privacy Act of 1974 by collecting and storing records tied to protected speech. The investigation exposed widespread gaps of FEMA's policies, processes, and procedures, resulting in systematic violations that unfairly targeted individuals across the country, is what the report found. Quote, the DHS Privacy Office examined screenshots of the tool that FEMA canvassers use to collect information from disaster survivors and data extracted from the tool database. This is what, again, the report said this. It said the tool's information indicated that canvassers included information related to political party affiliation, campaign signs, and other information related to freedom of expression. Since September of 2021, FEMA employees and contractors flagged things like gun signage 72 times, Trump 15 times, firearms 5 times, political things 3 times, and Biden and NRA twice, respectively. Other examples of things logged into FEMA's tracking system were notes like angry political rants, sign states, I'm a bitter gun owner clinging to my religion. Homeowner had a sign stating, this is Trump country. These things were all part of the investigation Noem launched into FEMA in response to Washington's guidance in Florida. The report cites the Daily Wire, noting that it was the first news outlet to report these allegations, and the findings appeared to contradict FEMA Administrator Criswell November's 19th testimony to the House Oversight Committee. Uh-oh, that's not good for them. That's not good for Criswell. That is lying under oath. Quote, we are working with the Inspector General to determine whether or not this is broader than this, but the evidence that I have seen so far shows that this was an isolated incident and is not going beyond what this one employee did. That's what she said at the time, and that was incorrect. That was a lie. That was perjury. The Florida incident promoted actions from dozens of elected officials and investigations from the state of Tennessee, the state of Florida, and the House Homeland Security Committee, also the House Oversight Committee, and an internal FEMA investigation. America First Legal, the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General, and the Office of Special Counsel. All of those. So it was also referenced in an executive order from Trump ordering FEMA to be dramatically reformed when a lot of this came out. And of course, the investigation has only proven what we already knew was happening. But how about this one? This is from Bill Brutch, and he writes, Glenn Morgan of We the Governed did a video. 1 in 7 Washington state voters are illegal. So this is in the state of Washington. 1 in 7 Washington state voters are illegal under the federal law. These are voters. I'm not talking about just citizens. We're talking about voters are illegal. But it might be even worse than this. In the video, he made actually a public, that he made public, is a report by Franklin County Auditor Matt Beaton, exposing serious problems with the Washington state voter rolls. Glenn indicated, using actual data, that 29 out of 39 counties and about 1 million registered voters studied showed about 14% of the voters did not have a social security number. This would potentially equate to about 709,000 voters statewide. The 14% missing social security numbers means the Secretary of State's claim that they use the Social Security Administration data to verify a voter data is misleading and deceptive. So you can't say, well, hey, we use the Social Security to verify whether or not they're legal or not, and then you're actually not doing it because they don't have Social Security numbers. Of additional concern was that using this data, about 25,000 statewide voter registrations are missing both the Social Security numbers and a driver's license information. Washington Secretary of State responded saying that in reality, the number is far lower, they said. It's fewer than 13,000, right? Well, the Franklin County report and Holmes administration confirmed, I mean, even if it is 13,000, that's a lot, right? But the administration confirmed that many in election integrity circles already know that Washington state voter rolls are a mess. They're inaccurate and they are overinflated. We proved this in 2021 to 2023 when hundreds of volunteers went door-to-door canvassing in 25 Washington state counties using detailed targeting lists. Okay, they had the list. They went door to door and they went there physically and reported on average of about a 40% anomaly rate. A 40% anomaly rate. In Spokane County, it was over 200% anomaly rate. Meaning, what you're asking, well, what's that mean? Meaning that out of every door knocked on registered voters' addresses, where a volunteer canvasser spoke to a person living at the address, so they had to speak to them, there were 2 registered voters at that address that required further investigation and usually were found to be improperly registered. In other words, the voter did not live there, or even many cases where the address did not even exist. In Washington state, more than 50% of all voters are automatically registered to vote through the Department of Licensing under the Automatic Voter Registration System, the AVR. And it is, in other words, you can only opt out of this by mail or by a county auditor's elections office. But of course, very, very few people actually take the trouble to do so. So the fact is, if if you allow non-citizens to attain driver's license, which the state of Washington and others do, then non-citizens will be registered to vote because they automatically get registered to vote when they go get a driver's license. Most Washington state government agencies now register people to vote as well. So it's not just to get your driver's license. DSHS offices provide public assistance for like Medicaid and food stamps and all that kind of stuff. Those agencies do it. Agencies and offices providing SNAP, Medicare, Apple Health, etc., those type of things. They all do it. They all sign people up automatically to vote. They sign them up to register to vote. And remember, Washington State, just like Oregon and some others, is a vote by mail only state. So you don't even have to provide ID to vote. So this comes up here. A coalition of top state election officials led by Mississippi Secretary of State Michael Watson urged congressional Republicans to require federal election offices to mandate stronger citizenship protections for voter registration, according to their letter. Watson and 10 other GOP secretaries of state urged Republican leadership in the Senate and the House to pass legislation requiring the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, or the EAC, to change the current federal voter registration form to demand proof of citizenship rather than relying on an application's word. So in other words, what's happening right now in some of these states is that they're, instead of requiring ID or requiring some sort of proof that they're a legal citizen, that all they have to do is just say, yeah, I'm a legal citizen. Or they ask them, are you a legal citizen? Yes. Or they have to check a box saying I'm a legal citizen. That's all. They don't have to prove it. They just have to state it. And so this would actually go, this bill, if signed into law, would require states to actually make it so that people they were required to prove their citizenship, whether it be with a birth certificate or social security card or whatever the case may be, just something to show that they were actually legal citizens. Then that's what would be required to register to vote. We'll be watching this. We'll see if this goes through. It would be nice, right? Because we need to have more confidence that our election system is on the up and up.
This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.